Detective work ain't easy. Most humans can't even get to the point where they can analyze their surroundings and deduce the unsolved, let alone animals.
However, with these two small, yellow, admittedly lazy detectives, the job is usually accomplished well enough. Most of the time. Maybe.
Detective Pikachu, the mystery-solving Pokemon of Rhyme City.
And Duckman, Private Dick and Family Man.
For this episode, both characters will be receiving all of their media, so both the video game and movie will be given to Detective Pikachu, as will the cartoon, comics, and games to Duckman.
Ribbit!
Ready when you are.
Max!
Ready to go!
Alright, let the episode commence.
I wanna be the very best, like no one ever was.
For over 20 years, 10-year-old Ash Ketchum has been walking the path to become a Pokemon master, but he wouldn't be half the trainer he is today without his best pal, Pikachu.
Ash's Pikachu is quick on his feet, is skilled in combat, and is always ready for a fight. All of these attributes, however, are the last thing you'd associate with a fellow Pikachu in Rhyme City, Detective Harry Goodman's Pikachu.
But this Pikachu wasn't always nonchalant. He and Harry were said to be the stuff of legends when it came to solving mysteries. However, on one case, they came face to face with the legendary Pokemon, Mewtwo, being held captive in a laboratory.
To make a long story short, the two helped Mewtwo escape the laboratory, but were caught in a crossfire when the scientists behind the experiment hunted them down and nearly killed them in a fatal car accident. Before Harry could succumb to his wounds, Mewtwo transferred Harry's fucking soul into Pikachu, completely robbing the previous Pikachu's mind. Jesus.
Well, Pikachu seemed perfectly fine with not existing, but after this incident, and a cover-up by the monopoly-running Clifford Enterprises, Harry was reported dead by all the public news outlets. When his son Tim got the news, he would travel to Rhyme City and meet his dad-turned-rat in his apartment, except for one problem. Good ol' amnesia.
Together, Tim and Pikachu would partner up to solve the biggest mystery ever presented to both of them. And along the way, the two's bond would grow stronger with every obstacle they cleared and every mystery they solved. Not like Tim and Harry had a great bond to begin with, but I guess this incident kind of helped them wipe the slate clean, despite them, not knowing they were father and son.
But we're not here to give you the TV tropes rundown on Detective Pikachu. We're here to go over the lethal stuff, which may be a tad difficult, because an overly pudgy mouse running at you at average human speed isn't the exact definition of danger.
We may be exaggerating a bit because Detective Pikachu isn't without his strengths. He still does have an untapped ability to use some of his innate electric abilities. According to Tim, he knows Quick Attack, which is a prioritized strike, Electro Ball, which increases its powers the slower an opponent is, which isn't like with DP, and Discharge, which sends out electricity in a wide radius. We even get to see it in action when he pops a giant balloon.
He has one more move under his belt though, Volt Tackle. This is the signature attack Pikachu have, and while it does inflict the user some recoil damage, it's a super strong physical attack. It even helped him go toe-to-toe with Mewtwo.
Although fighting Mewtwo isn't all it's cracked up to be, considering the Mewtwo was possessed at the time and the person in his body was clearly not in full control of Mewtwo's power, to the point where he'd be piloting its full extent anyways. Plus, the only thing we can assume for the extent of Mewtwo's power in the Detective Pikachu universe is that he's superior to the Torterra experiments, which are the size of mountains.
And if you're still skeptical, a rock from these Torterra nearly killed Tim and Pikachu, so it's extremely questionable to say at his peak, Detective Pikachu is as strong as Mewtwo. Though that's also not to say DP is without his combat experience, as he survived in the ring against a bloodlusted Charizard.
He survived being washed away by a pretty enraged Gyarados, and outran a herd of rapid Apom. He should also be as fast as Pidgeot, who dodged the blast of Mewtwo. He outran a Trevenant, and was both caught up with and knocked out a Noivern.
Let's keep in mind, it's hard to say if we can really scale Pikachu to the strength of a Canon Noivern, especially since in this universe, humans and Pokemon coexist. There's also the fact that this knocked himself out too. If I was to bet on his strongest muscle being anything, it would probably be his brain. His ability to communicate with Pokemon has helped solve many cases with angered or bloodlusted Mons. He deduced the whereabouts of an underground fight club with Tim by threatening to commit arson to Mr. Mime. Any clue put in front of him has always led to 10 more during his cases, ultimately leading to the true identity and past history eventually being discovered by the duo. Indeed, they are an impressive pair, but like we've alluded to, Pikachu is far from perfect. He can be extremely lazy, is a hardcore caffeine addict, and most of his attacks either hurt him or knock him out. And as well as he does in solving mysteries, Tim is also just as credible in solving these cases.
But without a doubt, this spin on one of gaming's most beloved icons is a breath of fresh air, and 10 cups deep in black coffee.
To the many mysteries and clues yet to be solved in Rhyme City, Detective Pikachu is always ready to catch 'em all.
Searching far and wide, teach Pokemon to understand the power that's inside. Pokemon, gotta catch 'em all. It's you and me. I know it's my destiny, Pokemon.
Born to Ivana Duckman and Red Crocker, but raised by Ivana and Mr. Duckman, Eric Tiberius Duckman, or just Duckman for short, graduated from high school in 1978 and managed to graduate detective school and is now a private dick.
Not just that, but a family man, as Duckman has 3 kids, Ajax, Charles, and Mambo Duckman, the latter 2 being conjoined twins, who he raised alongside Beatrice Duckman. The 2 met when Duckman was sent to take pictures of covered bridges. However, him and Beatrice would soon fall for each other.
Unfortunately, Beatrice was already married, although to someone she didn't really love. Once Duckman informed him of the affair they were having, he had a heart attack shortly thereafter. It was discovered that the 2 of them were pregnant, and they were married quickly.
However, this is where things go south. After around 15 years of marriage, Beatrice passed away after an incident at a parade, which Eric inadvertently caused.
The point is I wasn't expecting anything to happen, but when your cigarette punctured the Bullwinkle float and he started losing helium until his antler dipped into the clown car and sent it crashing into Puff the Magic Dragon, who bounced off Snoopy and knocked me into an open manhole, killing me, I realized this could happen to anyone.
This hit Duckman like a truck, as he soon moved in with his sister-in-law to ensure a stable environment for his children. But even years later, Duckman stands by. No matter how many women he sleeps with, he will love Beatrice till the day he dies.
Aw, poor guy. Although the sympathy gets harder and harder when you realise the kind of person Eric is. But we'll get into that later. What can this guy do? Duckman's pretty strong for somebody of his size, able to damage the likes of Cornfed, who can hit harder than Mike Tyson. He's smashed through walls with ease, and he's uprooted entire trees before.
Duckman's got strength for sure, but his best feats come from how much the guy can endure. He's been hit by trains, can scale to Ajax, who's shaken off walking through minefields, shaken off entire explosions, tanked attacks from Grandmama, one of which created an explosion that resembles a nuclear explosion, and survived the explosion to destroy 2 cars without a scratch.
But most impressively, Duckman was able to tank an explosion that destroyed multiple buildings, one of which being a museum. Coupled with the Grandmama's feat likely puts Duckman in the large building range, and considering he can scale to those who can damage him, this would scale to his physical strength as well.
Not to mention he's pounded Uranus several times. What? What?
Nothing. Do continue.
Alright. That's not all. Duckman's pretty fast. He's dodged bullets, lasers, and electricity.
He scales to people who can kick objects into space past satellites, and he reacted while being thrown into space himself.
Some of these feats are actually sub-relativistic.
That physicality goes hand in hand with his arsenal and abilities. He can turn invisible, can regenerate from just about anything, and can be squashed and stretched in ways that would usually be fatal. He's also shown to have fourth wall awareness, and he even drank an antidote that made it impossible for him to be erased from existence. Along with this, he's got insane stamina, able to talk for 3 days straight, stay up for a month, and endure a 24-hour-long beating. And finally, Duckman has the ability to read other people's minds.
And the arsenal Duckman's got is just as impressive. See, Duckman has a little thing called hammer space that basically allows Duckman to pull any objects he wants from behind his back, usually objects to abuse Uranus with.
You did it again.
Did what again?
Nothing. Sorry for interrupting.
Alrighty then. Duckman's weapons include, but are not limited to, Molotovs, rockets, guns, knives, bazookas, grenades, and most impressively, his dynamite. One stick of which was potent enough to destroy 2 buildings.
And finally, Duckman's intelligence. While often seen as incompetent, Duckman does occasionally show to be a serviceable detective, but generally, Cornfed's the one who does most of the detective work. But Duckman excels in combat experience, being a war veteran and being comparable to Cornfed in skill, who knows over 20 martial arts. Duckman mainly shines, however, with his opinionated speeches. He was able to change the entire world's opinion on someone in a single speech.
But this is where Duckman's strengths end. He's lazy, pretty incompetent most of the time, cowardly, and selfish. He's also pretty mean to others, especially to Uranus. Oh man, does he ever abuse Uranus.
Why don't you ever mention Fluffy? Like, he doesn't just abuse Uranus.
He also suffers from high blood pressure, and his eyes are his glasses, so if they were removed, he'd be blind basically.
In spite of his shortcomings, Eric's love for his family is still as strong as ever. If you need a crime to be solved, you can be sure that Eric Duckman will be there to ask what the hell you're staring at.
Okay, now that we've seen both sides of the coin, the gloves are coming off, their worlds are crossing over. Let's see what happens when these characters show their fictional fisticuffs.
Rhyme City, 1 PM. Detective Pikachu has received a distress call from a bar a few blocks away that a violent act was committed the night prior, and they require his assistance. After heading there, however, he finds another short anthropomorphic yellow detective already there.
What the hell are you staring at?
And who might this be?
Detective Pikachu is informed that this is Duckman, Private Dick. The two begin examining the crime scene together, and to break the ice,
You know, my kid is a human.
Oh wow, another family man. I respect that. Funny thing, I came here last night, but I can't remember any ruckus. Though I can't remember much.
Were you drinking at all?
Of course. What's the point of going to a bar after an excruciatingly long day of having each individual button of mine pushed by a group of nincompoops and nimrods who insist on making my life a bottomless, never-ending hellhole of indistinguishable entropy?
What time did you come here?
Probably arrived at 7 or 8. Left at around 3 a.m., I'd say.
Mr. Duckman, was it?
I'm afraid you're my prime suspect right now.
What?
Nothing concrete yet, you don't need to freak out.
Detective Pikachu can hardly finish before Duckman sends him flying across the room with an uppercut.
Get this ineffectual, inefficient, and incompetent whack job out of my face!
Sir, if you don't come quietly, I may have to resort to force.
Duckman breaks a bottle over the counter.
Eep. Here's a real high-class bout. You're up.
Duckman runs at the Pikachu and attempts to jab him. However, Pikachu dashes for the door, evading Duckman's swipe. Upon exiting the building, Detective Pikachu noticed that there were no police officers there. They must have all gone out to get lunch.
Oh, come on, why can't the police ever be useful in literally any media ever?
Duckman came charging through the door with his flamethrower. Flashbacks of Charizard come flooding back to Detective Pikachu. In the heat of the moment, he shoots an electric blast at the tip of his flamethrower, sending it back into Duckman's face. Rolling on the floor on fire, Detective Pikachu notices a bullet on the floor.
Hey, Mr. Duckman, sir?
Before he can finish his sentence, Duckman pounces onto the small rodent and begins wailing on him. DP sends out a discharge attack, sending Eric into a wall. But he quickly gets back on his feet and pulls out a bazooka.
Try this on for size, you incomprehensibly incompetent gumshoe!
Duckman blasts a rocket right at Detective Pikachu, which sends the mouse flying onto the top of a building. Detective Pikachu notices a small amount of gunpowder at the top of this building. It was all beginning to add up in his head, but before he could figure everything out, Duckman had climbed to the top of his roof and was running at Detective Pikachu with a stick of dynamite. Detective Pikachu quickly jumped off the roof, however, the blast sent him flying as the stick of dynamite exploded in Duckman's hand, sending the entire building crashing down.
No, that had evidence on it!
Duckman landed on the floor, covered in black soot, but he quickly got up and pulled out a pistol, shooting at Detective Pikachu and missing almost every shot. But his last shot was able to go through the yellow mouse's tail.
Ow. 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 Ow.
This'll teach you for framing me for a crime I didn't commit.
I've tried to tell you! I know you didn't do it now! He was sniped from the top of the building you just destroyed!
Oh, I, probably shouldn't have lit this dynamite then.
Just then, the dynamite exploded, destroying all the buildings in a close radius. As the smoke cleared, however, the ashes of Pikachu were found and Duckman was nowhere to be seen. But nearby lurked a yellow fowl, who had turned invisible to escape the crime scene undetected. Duckman began to sneak away before noticing that Pikachu's friend, Tim, was watching in awe.
What the hell are you staring at?
Duckman shouted before running away at full speed.
Knockout!
We just killed a Pikachu to an alcoholic. I feel ashamed.
Well, to be fair, we were justified if you ask me. Because while Detective Pikachu certainly could hold his own, Duckman's physicality was more than enough to get him the win here.
Don't get us wrong, Pikachu was a far more competent detective, sure. He can sometimes be a tad reliant on him, but not to the extent of Duckman with corn-fed.
While Duckman's got quite the vocabulary and some military experience, only Detective Pikachu was experienced in handling beings with abilities that greatly differ from his. Duckman's world is full of a lot of maniacs with swords, guns, and bombs. Detective Pikachu's has fire-breathing dragons and ninja frogs. He'll probably be able to handle Duckman's variety of abilities and weapons better than Duckman will handle Pikachu's.
Pikachu also had the greater ranged attacks and more abilities specifically catered for combat, with electricity being an innate ability he always has. Duckman's range stems from his firearms, and while turning himself invisible is useful, it's not as applicable in combat as a Volt Tackle, especially since Duckman's only turned invisible when he's being ignored. But, in spite of these advantages, Duckman had just about everything else.
Duckman's large quantity of building to large building level feats make him significantly stronger and more durable than the wall level Pikachu. Sure, his Volt Tackle damaged Mewtwo, but as we said, this was when he was being controlled by somebody who was significantly less experienced with Mewtwo's abilities, and this universe's Mewtwo being sea level is already coming from pretty iffy scaling.
Scaling to a Pokemon that's only that level due to its sheer size is pretty questionable, as is scaling to Noivern. It's not particularly justified to scale the Pokemon from the Detective Pikachu universe to the ones from the mainline Pokemon games or anime series, since they're very clearly different worlds. Duckman, meanwhile, outright tanks buildings exploding. You can't get much more directly building levels than that. Speed was a similar story. Pikachu may be able to evade attacks from Greninjas and Mewtwo, but neither of these Pokemon in the Detective Pikachu universe have any feats above Subsonic. The best Detective Pikachu has comes from his attack speed, but electricity only moves at hypersonic speeds without anything to travel through, generally. Duckman, meanwhile, can scale to, and has, sub-relativistic feats.
On top of that, Duckman's hammer space gives him way more tools to work with than Detective Pikachu. He has less abilities, but he makes up for it with the amount of things in his possession. Let's not forget that Duckman has that regeneration. While not as potent as other cartoon characters, it still ensures that, even if Pikachu damages him, he'll be back up and ready to keep on fighting almost right away.
And for one more thing, both are lazy, both are pretty cowardly, but Duckman is far more violent. Every day he basically murders 2 people. I mean, sure, they come back, but still, if one is going to be the first one to kill, it's going to be Eric, and considering his physical advantages, it's pretty unlikely that Detective Pikachu will be able to do much about it, as sad as it is.
Neither of these detectives are perfect, but Detective Pikachu's wider variety of abilities and better mental state weren't enough to defend against Duckman's wider arsenal, superior physicality, hard to overcome regeneration, and more violent characteristics.
The winner is Duckman.
Happy anniversary, Dad. First one without Mom. We know it's tough. We miss her too. I did want to tell you, the twins and me think you're doing a good job, Dad. And we love you.
Thank you, son.
Coming soon to Fictional Fisticuffs.